unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, the production of Souls and Liberty.
Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've become friends with school shooters. I've become friends with school shooters. I've become friends with school shooters.
All right, I bet he is friends with all of them. All the school shooters are trans. 34 days to go, and the overnights are rolling in on the Veep debate.
It looks like we have a new word in the lexicon, the liberal lexicon, which is knucklehead, which translates into liar.
Joining us today is political expert Jim Ellis. I'm your host, Gary Michael Voris, here in Houston. Jim, it wasn't really a smackdown as much as it was a case of Walz looking like he had stumbled into the wrong bar. I mean, in the age of the meme and 3-second attention span, the enduring memory is already, I'm friends with school shooters. What do you think?
It was quite an interesting evening. I thought that JD Vance's performance was quite good. And this is what we need to see more coming from the Trump campaign, because I think they've been off message here. They've got to get back to the types of things Vance was talking about last night in the way they present where their campaign is going. I mean, you look at Trump's response to this, and what's he talking about? He's talking about that Walz is stupider than Harris. That, Gary, does not drive votes. And that's what they have to do. As you said, we're 34 days away. We're less than that in early voting. We've got to see a more focused Trump campaign if he's going to pull this off. And I'm concerned about the message coming from their campaign. I was very pleased last night to see that Vance was hitting the right points. And, of course, Walz helped him with some of the kind of ridiculous comments he was making.
Yeah, well, help. He practically spoon-fed him. You know, one of the things that sort of struck me as I was listening and the debate kept going on, I was like, I guess I wouldn't be too, out of it or whatever, or disagreeing if, a few weeks or whatever into a Trump presidency, if he just said, yeah, I'm old and tired and I'm ready to pass the torch. Hey, if they can do it on the Democratic side, I can do it on this side too. And then just let JD Vance become the president. I mean, I gotta say, he was pretty impressive. I mean, it turned into a 3-1 again on the debate stage. Nobody's stuck by that. But boy, you talk about sort of calm, cool, and collected. He was just, I mean, the weird label, I mean, if that weird label had a place, it was hanging around Walz's neck, not JD Vance's neck.
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah, but he showed his true colors, and we're talking about, he finally had to admit, well, gee, when I was saying about how many times I went to China or if I was there at Tiananmen Square, gee, that's all not true. Just like it wasn't true that he had taken a weapon into war. Remember that? Let's not forget about that. And let's not forget about their side, too, all of the cover-ups of Joe Biden, which they all knew about. We seem to have forgotten that. The fact that they all knew that Biden was incapable of continuing. But when they thought it was in their interest to keep him on the ticket, that's what they did. When they realized, this isn't going anywhere, they forcibly removed him. And Gary, what's also going on, what's going on right now is this, the port strike.
Yeah.
And I think this could be really interesting. And I'm very interested in seeing Biden's response to that, which during the debate coverage and everything, he's saying he's not going to involve himself. Number one, it's because he's been a union hack his whole life, so he doesn't want to interfere with the unions. But number two, and it has to really still bother him, that they forcibly removed him from the ticket.
Yeah.
And the fact that he received 14 million votes to be the Democratic nominee, and she received 0, and she's the nominee. And I think the other reason he may not be involving himself to try to end that strike, this strike is not going to help her. Because when you've got ports shut down, the big ports in New York, Baltimore, and Savannah, that will affect the supply chain like it did early in his term. And we're going to see shortages again, very likely, if this strike drags on right through the critical time of the election.
Sure.
And I think this is a big negative for her that Trump needs to exploit. I think so far he's off to a pretty good start on that.
Yeah, these are all good points. I mean, look, as campaign seasons roll on, we know exactly what happens with October surprises and this and that and everything else. Listen, we're going to step away for just a moment here, Jim, but when we come back, I want to hear what your thoughts are about Vance going after the media. He did it politely, but he was also very straightforward about it. Back right after this. The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice. But we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance, to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today. All right, welcome back, Jim. Take a look at this headline from Fortune magazine about Americans' lack of trust in media. It's from a Gallup poll. That's pretty desperate. We had something of this again. I mean, I don't think anybody's surprised last night. All of a sudden, here we had 3-1 again, and they cut his mic and the whole bit. But, it was, I have to say, I think he handled it masterfully. He really did. He was very composed and just said, look, ladies, here's the record. You're not saying it right. And, he corrected it. And of course, they lost their, am I going to cut your mics thing. But, what were your thoughts during that exchange?
Well, he was getting them off of their blanket support for Harris and what they were supposed to do there to swing the debate Harris's way. And I think that was a signal, actually, I think, Gary, that they were panicking the way that Walz was doing so poorly. And so they needed to get it back on track. But I thought JD Vance handled that beautifully. He knew he was up against a 1-on-3 situation again. I mean, he knew what he was going in with CBS. And so you have to use your time, the limited time you have, to correct these misstatements that people are making. Yeah,
I got to say, a number of things strike me about these debates. A, they're not debates. They're really not. I mean, the candidates never really get to have an exchange with each other. They might try to throw a barb or something, but that's about it. I don't understand the rationale. I mean, I know these are already agreed to and all of that. And maybe Trump is now sort of drawing the line in the sand saying, no, I'm not doing the 60 Minutes interview, but we're not doing another debate also. Do you think the time of, particularly with the emergence of social media, I mean, Trump goes and sits on Elon and gets 1 billion views. Why the hell does he have to stand up on a debate stage, or any Republican stand up on a debate stage and subject themselves to that? Do you think the era of the national debate thing has on the networks, the liberal networks, is over? Are we done with those now, do you think?
We are, and I think it's in the Republicans' interest not to do them. So if it's always going to be 1-on-3, and not only that, but Gary, as you saw, that the questions are always on the liberal agenda.
Sure.
And trying to get to try to catch the Republican in a bad statement on something that they think is important for the liberal agenda. And that's reflected in the polls that you were talking about, how poorly viewed the media is. They're down with used car salesmen and members of Congress. So it's not the way it was when you were in the media.
No, it's certainly not. I mean, I actually was a producer on the 1992 Democratic debate at WBBM in Chicago. I was working in Detroit. We had a simulcast between the state of Illinois and the state of Michigan. And I was there during the, Paul Tsongas and Bill Clinton debate. And
Oh, right.
I was one of the producers. I mean, I produced the questions for that debate, and it was decidedly different. It has just moved so far now to the left that you're like, I mean, I don't understand I agree with you. I don't understand what the point would be. You know, I'm glad Trump walked away from any, debate call on her part, because it would just be the same thing again. And he's not even doing the 60 Minutes interview. Literally on this media question, I mean, it seems to me from old media dude here, that we've turned a corner. Why should he ever, and not just Trump, any Republican candidate, say it's Vance in 2028, why should he or anybody ever even grant an interview to any of these people again? They're almost becoming irrelevant. Why would you go sit on
Right,
any
because
interview?
you can talk directly to the people now. And that's what Trump was doing through the Elon Musk interview and with his own Truth Social network. And I agree. I don't know why Republicans should enter into these debates. So we may have seen the last one. I think I thought they were smart this time to just sort of ignore that debate commission, because the debate commission, it's always the same thing. They allow the media to run these debates, and it's all based on the liberal agenda. And then they gang up on the Republicans. So, they're just cutting their own throats on this. And I think we have seen the last of the debates. And you're right, they're not debates, they're just forums.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's okay if you schedule something like a town hall forum and both candidates are there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who the moderator is at that point, but it's not two people. But that sort of thing. Put them in the same room where they can kind of go at each other with an audience, and the audience gets to ask the questions or something. It's just need a moderator to just maybe be a timekeeper more than anything. But something like that, I think, is kind of acceptable. But these dog and pony shows they roll out, the CBS News, ABC News. I mean, please. So, and this may be the last. This is from a hack of old CBS News days. I worked at CBS News. I worked on debates, presidential debates. I would never set foot on a stage like that if I was one of them again, ever. All right, when we come back, we'll take a little break here. When we come back, the real polls are showing, as the final month approaches, something the Harris team is probably got to be pretty nervous about. We'll be right back.
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
No matter who wins in November, we have to embrace that we are living in a post-Christendom culture. And the heart of that is a rejection of the gospel. As one item on our agenda to combat this, Souls and Liberty is hosting our first annual retreat at sea. You might be familiar with the annual event we produced for over 10 years at Church Militant. Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent, and I are going to be doing the presenting, and the theme is Christians in Exile Triumphing in Adversity, which provides a whole range of discussions to think about. Now, we sail out of Galveston, Texas to the Western Caribbean November 10th to the 17th, yes, right after the election. I think all of us are probably going to need it one way or the other. Please join us for serious discussion, spiritual preparation, and bonding, very important, bonding with fellow Catholics. Registration information is provided below and on our site at soulsandliberty.com/retreat-at-sea 2024. So sign up, and we hope to see you there. All right, welcome back. Jim, as you've said on this show many times, not all polls are created alike. I want to show the audience this graphic here demonstrating the truth of that. Now, as you look at this graphic, it's a breakdown of practically every major polling outfit there is in the country, ranked according to their error rate. The top 5, I want to pull people's attention to it right there, is At Last Intel, then Trafalgar Group, then WIC, then Insider Advantage, and Rasmussen reports. Those 5 in that order. When you move down, way down the list with giant margins of error, you run into things like the Siena College New York Times poll, Monmouth, ABC News, Washington Post, Quinnipiac. You see all of those, and as you're looking at them, you're like, wow, you know what? If the New York Times and, the Siena College poll has this sort of a dead heat and Trump up a little bit, and those other polling ones that have been proved accurate, they've got Trump, like, for example, leading in Wisconsin this morning by 1.5 points. Pennsylvania, I haven't seen a Harris lead poll in Pennsylvania for about a week now. It's certainly not from those top 5 guys, who are the ones I think you need to look at. You're a polling dude, if there ever was a polling dude. I don't know.
Yes.
I think you date polls. Take them out to dinner. Tell us what's going on with the polls right now.
They go a little bit up and down. I think the important thing to look at these polls is the trend. And the trend is definitely moving towards Trump. And again, it really comes down to those critical battleground states. Keep in mind that as long as Trump keeps the 25 states that voted for him twice, where North Carolina is his weakest, and I think North Carolina right now is the one we need to be paying attention to. It's the most important state on the Trump agenda. He has to win there. If he does, and he takes Georgia and Pennsylvania, he wins. It doesn't matter what the other states do. And that gives him the 270 votes. Look at those 3 states all the time: North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania now. Before, I thought it was Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. I think the map has changed, and the polling is telling us that. And the other thing beyond and underneath the polling, and I think some of the polling that you mentioned here, particularly in Pennsylvania, is substantiating what we're seeing on real numbers. And by that, I mean on the voter registration numbers is a clue. The early voting numbers, when we see that here in a couple of weeks, that's going to be another clue as to what's happening. But in Pennsylvania, keep in mind that when Trump won the state in 2016, there were 916,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. Mm-hmm. The new numbers came out last week, and that deficit now, there's only 338,000 more Democrats than Republicans. So the state has changed by almost 600,000 Republicans, the net gain in those 8 years. That explains your polling, Gary. There are simply more Republicans now in the state, and therefore it's reflected in the fact that Trump is doing better in the polls. Keep in mind, if you go back and look at the polls in 2020 and in 2016 in Pennsylvania in particular, and Wisconsin's in this category too, and so is Nevada, that Trump is doing better in those 3 states than he did in either of the 2 previous elections. And his margin of defeat in those states were several points better than how he was polling.
Yeah.
So if he's polling higher now and we see that same pattern developing, there's no guarantee of that, but if it does develop, he wins at least one of those states and maybe all 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of court rulings that came out in the last few days in Michigan. Michigan is the most manufactured Marxist state, I think, in the country when it comes to cheating and stealing the vote. It's not the most blue in terms of the vote. That'd be like New York and California stuff. But as in sort of locking down and stealing the state, it's got to be Michigan. And they just got a court ruling that I'm sure Harris and then Whitmer and Jocelyn Benson and Dana Nessel are probably pulling their hair out over.
They'll probably just ignore it, though. It was a surprising ruling, very surprising coming from there. But, it wouldn't surprise me, as we've seen Joe Biden ignore the U.S. Supreme Court a couple of times, particularly on the student loans. Remember that he said that was unconstitutional what he was doing, and Biden says, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And they still are able to get all that money out. So the court ruling is a positive. And we'll see if they implement it based on that court ruling. I have my doubts.
Yeah, that's it. All right, Jim, I want to get your final thoughts. 1 minute, everything that happened last night, what happens with the election as a result, if anything?
Well, I thought that the best part of the night last night was I think JD Vance brought a lot of credibility back to the Republican ticket. I think he showed very, very well. Anybody that watched that probably thought that he did a better job than Walz. They exposed Walz for what he is or isn't. I mean, he is kind of a scatterbrain at the very best, and probably not somebody you want dealing with our enemies overseas. And I think that maybe came across. But overall, this is still an election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and the people will make their decision based on their feelings about those two candidates.
Yeah, that's it. All right, Jim, 34 days to go. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and your great analysis as always. Thank you. All right, we normally end with a brief commentary at this point, but let's just say this. Harris picked Walz to shore up her support among white Midwestern men so she could lock down those states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. No other reason. Well, she probably woke up this morning regretting that choice. She didn't think Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania would be able to do that, lock down those states, because, well, he's a short Jewish fellow that she believes wouldn't be relatable to beer-swigging, plain-speaking union dudes in those battleground states. Here's what's for certain. This X posting from Libs of TikTok would never have come into existence if she hadn't picked Walz, a doofus dude, if there ever was one. Look at this. So what I got so far from this debate is that Tim Walz is a knucklehead who misspoke and is friends with school shooters. Do I have that right? When he got challenged regarding his lie about being in China during the Tiananmen Square massacre, he rambled on about being from a middle-class family and riding his bike with friends when he was a little kid. What the hell does that have to do with what you were asked? When pressed further, he had nothing except, I'm a knucklehead. The definition of knucklehead is an idiot. So for the first time in the campaign, he did actually tell the truth. And yeah, Kamala has serious buyer's remorse this morning, but nowhere near as severe as a case of buyer's remorse that the nation would have if she wins. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Vorse.